thank you for being here with us today. And we are gonna discuss, today we are gonna discuss being here with us today. We're gonna discuss legal studies. You know, we tend to see law as a very local, national based subject. And yet today our panelists will show us that law can be very, very international. For the people following us from home, please do not hesitate to raise your hand to ask questions at any time. The same for those that are following us on the streaming on Facebook. And I'm going to introduce the panelists. I'm going to go on the order in which I see them on my screen. Sinisa Rodin, it's a longtime friend and colleague. He was a Jean Monnet chair. He was one of the people who negotiated the entry of Croatia into the European Union, and has been now for several years a justice at the European Court of Justice. He studied in the US previously. He will tell you about. Melanija Radnovic, she directs the international program at for law at the American University College of Law. And then Stefania Baroncelli is actually a fellow. We did our PhD students at the European University Institute a long time ago. And she is a professor of law at the University of Bolzano, where she also served as deputy provost for many years. And last but not least, Fernanda Nicola, who's gonna direct the traffic here and ask questions, is a professor of law at the University of American University, like Stefania, a partner in crime in several projects doing together, including this, which is this webinar is actually concluding a grant, an Erasmus Plus grant on international higher education. Fernanda, I would leave it to you to start asking questions to our panelists.
Sure. I would say, Federica, everyone has a view probably on this panel on why exchanges in legal educations are worthwhile, what are the challenges to it, and here we're talking about legal education also across the Atlantic with different perspectives. So why don't we open up to our speakers and offer them at least an initial 5 minutes to articulate their views on the issue, and then we'll move on with a conversation, a Q&A, and we're also open to get questions from the audience. But let's get started, I think, with my colleague, Melanija Radnovic, who has much more experience than I do in this topic and can tell us. She's also organizing international conferences on the topic, and she can let us know a little bit what is the current setting among exchanges of US and European students across the Atlantic in legal education. Please, Melanija, you can start 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to Stefania and Sinisa last but not least. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda, so much. And thank you, Federica, very much for inviting me to participate in this wonderful panel. Great to be here with both Sinisa Rodin and Stefania Baroncelli. We had the opportunity to communicate earlier, and it's great to be on the same panel with the same passion and similar points of view. Well, we all agree that legal education plays absolutely important role in developing lawyers who act kind of as social engineers, right, in this globalized world. But it's important the law schools in this globalized world provide law students with that global, rich, contextual, and multidisciplinary mindset so they can successfully tackle all the global challenges of nowadays. And we have seen resistance across a lot of law schools over the time both in the United States, I think more in the United States than maybe in many other countries, because we experienced that in many European countries, there is actually that push for internationalization of campuses, which didn't actually take place at the same time in the United States. What we have seen is that faculty are more open to this point of view, and you have, as a consequence, a lot of collaboration between the faculty across the globe, and involvement with a lot of global-oriented research, which didn't always translate into the law curriculum. I have to say that I'm simply lucky that I have been working for the law school that has been a leader in the past 40 years in the United States for international education. American University, Washington College of Law actually this year celebrates 40th anniversary of international law and international programs. About 80%, and I'm saying this with a huge pride, is that between 65 to 80% of our JD students express interest in international law, and they admit that they actually enrolled at Washington College of Law because of our high ranking in international law and all our abroad programs. We are also one of the law schools in the United States that has one of the oldest LLM program, which brings together about 80% of these participants are coming from various countries across the globe. It's a really long-standing experience. We have long time ago defined that our interest and focus needs to be in producing students who are able to tackle all the global challenges. We find very important opportunity to provide our JD students a chance to go and meet and learn about meet students across the globe and learn about point of view of other countries' law, and also to invite international students who enrich our classrooms. So even though not every student at Washington College of Law will end up going abroad, they have opportunity to commingle with international students to kind of acquire a big picture, kind of boundary-free viewpoint, which will prepare them to take on a variety of national and cross-national challenges. I would say at this point about 10 to 15%.
Melanija, you're frozen. So I don't know if you're coming back.
Of our change program in 21 country. We also, I hope, I can see that my internet seems to be unstable, so I hope you can hear me well. We have also partnerships with about 30 universities across the globe who are sending us LLM students. We are very proud of that. And in addition, we also offer summer abroad programs, which are short-term, very specialized, very liked, adored by our students. We get also a lot of students from other law schools in the United States participating in our semester exchange and summer abroad programs as well. And I would say about 30% of our JD students participate in summer abroad programs. They realized the importance of opportunity, having hands-on opportunity, working with our faculty, but communicating with professionals from across the globe. Most of our programs nowadays are in Europe, in The Hague, London, Brussels, and Geneva. We are utilizing partnerships with the World Trade Organization, International Intellectual Property World Organization, number of international law firms that are communicating with us and providing opportunities to our students to have hands-on opportunities, not only learning opportunities, but hands-on opportunities throughout the summer. So we are proud and to be kind of the leaders of the pack in the United States. And we are hosting for the past 10 years the annual conference on international legal education abroad and LLM administration as well. And I can tell you with really pride that there are more and more law schools who are participating in these conferences and are willing to learn from us and the best practices we can share to provide to their students this excellent opportunity. While United States for a long period of time was a country that was not really leading the international legal education. We were more kind of domestically oriented. This is really great change, and it's taking place, I would say, for the past 10 years, again, we are not the only law school with 4 years of experience, which is really great news. I think I would wrap up with this.
Great. Thank you, Melanija. Great rosy pictures. And we'll go back to you talking more about what are the challenges for our second round. But please, Stefania, go ahead and we'd love to hear from you, your take on exchanges in legal education across the Atlantic. Thank you.
Well, let's say that in Europe, law, but also in the United States, law is still a strongly national discipline. However, the economic, social, and cultural relationships it regulates are increasingly no longer so in times of globalization, as Melanija was saying just before me. And so in response, the Western European countries in particular have been trying for some time to coordinate their legal systems with their neighboring countries. And so a key role is played by the training of multilingual young lawyers who specialize in bilateral and multilateral legal relations. As Federica was saying before, I'm working at the border between Italy and Austria, for instance. And there is a strong request, a strong need of lawyers who are trained in both the legal orders, so the Italian and also Austrian or German. So in my university, in reality, we have some double degrees, and in Italy there are a lot. There are growing. For instance, also at the University of Florence, we have a double degree with France, another double degree with Germany. And it is a very important and requested degree. So there is a growing request by students to enroll in these degrees. And in fact, also the selection of students is getting more and more difficult. Why? Because at the end, you have 2 degrees. So you have a degree in law in Italy, in the Italian framework, and also in the French or German. And this is very useful, of course, at the end. And I think it's an easy way of behaving, because the decision of studying abroad, for instance, I don't know, there was in actually until the Brexit, there were a lot of students from Italy going to the UK to study law in the UK. Now less due to the increasing fee that you have to pay when you study there. Yeah, at the end, at least in the undergraduate study, is not so justified in my point of view, because actually it is important to have a solid foundation in your legal system, this in general. I mean, I myself, I'm very in favor of the internationalization. I studied in France, I studied in Germany, and in the United States. In fact, I have my undergraduate in Italy, but then I studied in New York at New York University. I had an LLM there. But at the, what gives the possibility? Of course, you have the market is larger. So you have more possibilities, more doors open for you. So for instance, for a certain period, I was working in Brussels for an American law firm. And this is something for which you need to have an American LLM. Otherwise, you are not hired by this big American law firm. And of course, you are paid much more than in an Italian or, let's say, medium European law firm. So I think that the incentive is very much economic, so for your future. but it is very specific of the American system. I don't know what else I can do. Of course, now there are the possibility to, to have, well, another drawback maybe is the problem of recognition of degrees in Europe, which is the one I have some friends, for instance, who have degree in different states, and then to become lawyers in France or Belgium or Italy, they have to integrate the exam, and they had to pass different degree to be admitted to the bar. So, the legal profession is still different from the others, I would say.
Sure. Thank you so much, Stefania. So we heard from Melanija about the perspective of in general, American law schools, and what's the prestige or the advantage to have promote these exchanges among law school across the Atlantic, between especially Europe and United States. We heard from Stefania about the advantages that these kind of exchanges create, especially for students in Europe that are taking advantage of US LLMs to work in firms, or in Europe, there's also lots of advantages in dual degrees among European nations. And I think languages are also, you have different legal systems among the 27 member states of the European Union. So you really have an advantage of learning about another legal system, something that in the US, despite we have 50 relatively different legal systems, we still all study US law. And although bar exams are different, but yet there is a sense of one US law degree, much more relevant than there is in the EU. But so now the perspective is from a EU law judge, a judge who sits in Luxembourg, and can tell us from the perspective of a EU law wide court, what is the relevance of these exchanges in legal education, especially, is it worth it to have a US law degree if you are becoming a judge on the European court, where you deal every day with European law?
Well, I think I have to start from a different position and go back into history and look why and how I started to look, so to say, across the border for my own legal education. And Stefania rightly observed that many legal systems or many educational systems train students into profession. And profession, of course, is tied to a national legal system. So if you want to be a lawyer, really, you have to master your national legal system and enter into your national legal profession. So this is different from one state to another. But if you take Germany, for instance, Germany is one of those radical examples where law students are trained into legal profession. My beginnings were different. I was an academic lawyer, and I graduated from the law school with good grades, got an assistantship at the faculty, and then I told myself, look, is that all, or is there something beyond what I've learned, beyond what I knew? So it took me a couple of years until I found the right master's program, and finally I landed in Michigan, at the University of Michigan. And then again, having come to an American university, you see different types of students and different career paths that they are pursuing. Some of them were taking the master's just as a kind of conversion course to be able to take bar exam in the United States and well, extend their activities to the United States. Some of them had more academic interests, like me, and some of them just wanted to learn without any clear career path. But it still rings in my ears what I've heard from one of my professors there, who said something like, we have two main objectives here at this master program. One is rational objective, which is to learn something, and the other one is experiential objective, to have an experience of meeting different people, meeting different, living in another environment, and well, opening oneself to new experiences. As the time was passing, and that was, mind you, in 1992 when I graduated from Michigan. But by passing of time, the experiential objective became much more important than the rational objective. So what I've learned in that 1 year is one thing. I forgot also a lot. But the experience of having studied abroad, and mind you, this was a 4-degree program, and there is a big difference between just visiting a foreign university and being there and not taking exams and not taking a degree, and taking a degree. If you, and I would strongly encourage all students to take a degree, or at least courses which are counted for degree, because that changes the experience altogether. So this experience profoundly changed my life, my understanding of things, my way of dealing with legal problems, and I believe that it was the crucial crossroads in my life which ultimately brought me where I am now.
Now, Fernanda, we have the first question. I'm going to read it, and then it's been waiting for a while, and then you're going to direct traffic some more. It's from Rita Giannini Watson. And she asked, isn't the problem more at the level of access to the profession rather than studying law? Access to profession is regulated by professional associations, and they are the ones who need to open up. The English profession is very open. For instance, you can even qualify as a solicitor from abroad, but many are very closed. I don't know who wants to answer.
Sure. But I have to say, the Judge Rodin was an academic before his transatlantic legal education. And so I think that as an academic, these experiences can really broaden your perspective. But also as a professional, since many of these experiences, and we were talking about you studying in the US, as a European studying in the US, you can have a different kind of more hands-on or practical approach. So perhaps Melanija and Stefania could answer our question, the question Federica just put on the table about, is there a problem with professional affiliations, which I think Melanija works daily with this issue of, can you take the bar exam as a European student, and what do you do to do that?
Yes, I would agree that that's one of the challenges. I was just looking at my list of challenges, and that's one of the challenge for sure. On one hand, if you're thinking about JD students, so American students going abroad, the only way actually to be barred in other countries, if you literally do the dual degree, right? And there are not that many students, as I said, while I painted the picture rosy, which it is, because we are very proud comparing with other law schools. If we have a 65% of students coming through our door as 1L saying they're interested in international law, not necessarily going abroad, but in international law, including some of them going abroad, that trickles down to 10 to 50% of students really participating in abroad programs. Dual degree, semester exchange, or summer abroad, right? Dual degree is the only program for JDs that they can be barred someplace else, right? It's either Spain or Italy or France or Canada. But semester exchange does not give you that opportunity. You actually have that great chance to be immersed in other country, jurisdiction, and understand the law and do comparative studies, but it's more useful when you actually go back home. And so the same when it comes to summer abroad, which is even shorter, great hands-on opportunity, kind of being immersed for a shorter period of time, but not really opportunity to practice law. When it comes to international students coming to the United States, again, you really have We have a plethora of amazing curriculum, right? Great classes you can pick and choose from. However, that's limited because in order to take the bar exam, you have a limited list of courses, it's really prescribed list of courses you can do as LLM, which is not that exciting, but that's the only way to be barred. And again, you can be barred in New York. In some cases in California, Texas is also kind of opening to it, and Florida, but they're already setting too many hoops for international students to go through. So from my experience, WCI, Washington College of Law experience, it seems that only dual degree will offer you opportunity to be barred in 2 jurisdictions, but everything else is really just opportunity to expand your point of view and understanding as a global lawyer, right, of differences between the countries.
Thanks,
So
Melanija.
really,
and I teach one of these classes, Constitutional Law. It's not boring. And I have the most amazing class of LLMs who are really interested in studying US constitutional law and also see its application. I mean, they're going to be grilled on how to apply this concept for a bar exam question. And that part is really tricky for them, but it's part of what we do in the class. But thank you.
yes,
Stefania,
and
if you want to add to it.
Just to add, that goes back to what I mentioned, that openness of the faculty is way broader than openness of the law school to do comparative studies. And having faculty who is teaching and using comparative method is extremely important when we are teaching even domestic courses, because still gives a perspective, the global perspective as well.
I agree. Stefania.
No, I fully agree that the relational objectives are really fundamental, are very important in this kind of international education. It opens up your mind. Also, the way professors are teaching are very different in the states of Europe and in the US, and you can learn a lot. I learned a lot from the American law school. For instance, the clarity of the concept, then I had a lot of colleagues who decided to remain in New York to the US and study and work there. So to study for the bar exam and then study there. Then we must also say that to be a lawyer or to pass the bar exam is not the only work in the world. So there are, fortunately, different professions that you can have being a lawyer. The fact is that, there are some education, like if you study economics, for instance, you study some accountancy, you study some financial issues, some law, and then it's easier to find a job. So there are a different type of job that you can do in the management, in the private enterprises, and so on. As lawyers, we have always to solve issues, to solve problems. And of course, you really have to master very well and to find also, the skills that are required are twofold, I think. One, you have to know and to understand the language and the content, but also you have really to link the concept. And this is something like a soft skill that you improve very much when you go abroad. And then if you read also the judgments of the courts, in Italy, for instance, there are references more and more to, to courts in Germany or whatever. But of course, if you have to solve a specific issue, you have to find this specific point and that's it. But it's true that, I think it's fundamental in a way or another to have an international legal education, because otherwise, as the legal profession is very much, on the law of whatever type, you risk of seeing the world as a kind of problems. And it's difficult to be more proactive and to do and to work successfully in other professions.
Great. Thank you, Stefania. And Sinisa, do you want to jump in? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was reflecting on different things by listening, and one thing that I simply need to say is that the style of legal teaching in the United States, and at least in those countries of Europe that I know, is so different that it creates a small cultural shock for every European student who comes across the ocean to study in the United States. I'll tell you a small anecdote. I knew a Croatian professor of international law who died a few years ago, and he died in very old age. He was older than 100 years. So he studied law at times of Habsburg monarchy. And he would tell me, we used to talk about things, and he would tell me, look, my dear colleague, at my time when I was studying, it was necessary only to come 3 times at the law faculty in order to get a law degree. First time you come to get enrolled, the second time you come to pass your final exam. The final exam was comprehensive, all subjects in at once, and then the third time you have to come to pick up your diploma. So basically, it was just three times during 5 years of studying. Essentially, this reduces studying to memorizing text. At times when I was studying, that was much later, it was the same system. Classes were not really mandatory. On the paper they were, but nobody was going anyway. You would see professor once or never. It was a memory exercise. And then I thought, well, maybe it was communist Yugoslavia. Maybe that's communist system. Maybe there's something fundamentally rotten with it. But then I discovered in Germany at a good university, at Heidelberg University, that big classrooms with distinguished German professors are completely empty with only few students attending. So nobody attends classes as a matter of routine, even in German. And that's why American legal education and British as well, I have to say, are so much different. I couldn't put my hand in fire for every university, but at least those universities I know, they have a completely different relationship between students and professors, and this interaction and dialogue and analysis creates an added value that you can simply not get at places I know in Europe.
Right.
One thing that strikes me is you are all academics. None of you is actually in the profession, right? So we
not right now, but we had a past also in the profession.
As lawyers, I mean, as lawyers.
We were lawyers for a brief time in our lives. You're supposed to be. And actually, Sinisa, by being a judge, is more in the profession than everybody else, I think.
Yeah, but the justice in the European Court of the Court of European Union, they need to have a comparative perspective by definition. So my question would be, how much in your lawyer's profession, not justice, in your lawyer profession, you were helped by the fact of having an international education and perspective? Who wants to come in?
Well, I can tell you, when I brought up things that I've learned in the United States, when I brought them up at home in Croatia later on during my legal work, people would say, but that's the United States, they have a different legal system, that's common law, so forget it. Then I've spent a year in Heidelberg later on. And I would have learned, that Germans have very similar solutions to legal problems as Americans, just in a bit different schematics. And then my response would be, to those people, I would say, look, maybe it's common law, maybe it's American, but Germans have the same thing, and then that would make them think. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not always productive to have this national approach to legal questions. Yeah, there are rules have to be applied, but if you take a legal problem, a legal issue as such, and if you want to really solve that legal issue, you have to go around and look from different perspectives, not just from different perspectives of different legal systems, but you have to reach outside the law. You have to be a social scientist, or political science, all social sciences, anthropology, sociology, everything comes into play when it comes to solution of legal problems.
I totally agree. And when in my brief experience as a lawyer in Boston, so with a European and an American legal education, and I was hired by Big Law to work in a law firm in Boston. One of our major clients was a big multinational company with headquarters in Switzerland, but also in the US and Canada. And the litigation they had was in Canada in that case, and my research to somehow figure out and create and find a creative way to defend them was to use the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights, because the Canadian Constitutional Court was very keen to look at that jurisprudence. So my work was only memos and memos, figuring out legal strategies on how to protect this multinational corporation, not the most lovable one, but as I won't reveal the name, but based on the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights. And even if the litigation was in Canada, I was doing that from Boston. So that was a very peculiar case, but by my expertise and my legal education really served the client in that particular case. So it was a terrific experience, and I could leverage that. But I'm sure we all have examples of that sort. I just wanted to give one more answer to the question that was put on before about legal professions. And so we've heard from Stefania and Melanija about being able to access the bar exam in the US, despite some difficulties. But once you get your, as Sinisa was saying, that degree, the LLM in the US, it's pretty forward and straightforward to access the profession by taking the bar exam in the US. I think the other way around is harder for US students, and I have more and more students, especially this semester in my relatively small comparative law class, but I have more students that are willing to go and do dual degrees abroad in Europe, especially where we have them with Nanterre in France, with Comillas in Madrid, and with Louis in Rome. And they're willing to go and do those dual degrees. And the question is, will they become lawyers in Italy, France, and Spain? Most likely not, because the legal associations are very close, as the question is asking that. Is that a problem, though? And I think Stefania told us, well, if you have an American-based law firm, and that's why sometimes we push them towards those international bars that are in Brussels, Luxembourg, Geneva, and a few other, European countries, but really practicing with an LLM, Italian law in Rome, it's going to be hard, because you won't be a lawyer unless you're hired by an American, a US firm operating in those countries.
Yeah,
perhaps you can say more about that.
You see, there's a big problem in Europe, which I call the inclusive approach. In order to be a recognized lawyer, you need to pass almost everything. Everything is mandatory, very, very little choice of electives. I was asking myself questions, why one has to pass a labor law exam if it doesn't want to practice labor law later on in a career. But for some reason, in most of European universities, labor law is on the mandatory list. So Europe introduced this Erasmus scheme of exchange of students and professors. And before a student can go to study a semester at another law faculty, he or she has to sign, I think it's called learning agreement or something like that. And in this learning agreement, you have to specify what courses will you take and how those courses will then be recognized once you come back. And I know a little bit about that. I was looking into that and working on that a bit. I would say at least in Croatia, but my hunch is not only in Croatia. The attitude is, well, you need to take all the same courses that we teach at home. So for instance, if you want to take labor law at the university in another European state, you should be able to somehow bring that labor law credit home. But if you want to take, I'm imagining now, air and space law, and your home university does not offer air and space law, you would have problems. You would have problems, bringing this credit back home and being recognized. So to sum it up, I think that the attitude in Europe is that if you have to go to study abroad, you should be studying the same things, not different things. Difference is not being recognized as a value. So European lawyers are not looking for European, employers probably are not looking for people that know different things. They want a cliche. They want a standard curriculum that everybody has to pass in order to qualify as a lawyer. And then I had the same discussion with the medical doctors, and I said, well, what makes you a medical doctor? If you have not studied plastic surgery, does that disqualify you from being a doctor? Anatomy, I understand. You need to know anatomy. But plastic surgery is an elective. So we still have a very, very comprehensive core curriculum in law. Everything is core. And you have to study for 5 years, which is double than in the United States. And after 5 years, you don't really care about, mobility or studying abroad. You are squeezed like a sponge and just want to start earning money for a living.
I think Melanija has a direct answer to this. Go ahead.
For a comment, right? So, no, I agree. And someone who was educated in Europe and later as a mid-career professional educated in the United States, I always use a line and I say, I wish we can have a perfect marriage between European legal education and United States legal education, because there are some pros and cons on both sides of Atlantic. While there is no such a prescribed list of courses, as you all know, especially for our JDs, I think what I am as international always missing in our curriculum is at least have a mandatory one international law course, which is not. International law courses are always elective. Thankfully, again, in our law school, we have a bunch of students who are interested in taking these courses. But I just don't understand how in 21st century, someone, even if you want to practice only domestic law for the rest of your life, that you don't have any exposure to understanding international normative system, right? International law. So I see that as a challenge on United States side. And to go back to what we talked about, practicing law and employers, I think we still have to educate employers as well. On United States side, as you know, because Sinisa, you also studied in the United States, and is that there are bunch of boxes that our students are expected to check, right? You must be part of the clinical education. There is expectation you will do externship and internship. You will work during the summer. You should be part of law review. It's really a lot on students' shoulders. So what we have is a challenge when it comes to encouraging, we are not in a business of selling these programs, right? Making sure that we send students to participate dual degree, semester exchange, only when it makes sense for them. And Fernanda is actually part of our team, and when we are grilling and having interview with those who would like to participate, we want to make sure this is really going to being something that it's add on to their American education. There is still that challenge, and I really closely work with students, making sure they know how to strategize, what language to use when they're selling themselves to an employer, even United States employer, because the employer keep thinking like, oh, why would you go abroad, right? Studying someplace else instead of doing A, B, C, D, which I expect you to see on your resume. And so that's usually a huge challenge, where on our side, which is slightly different than in Europe, we allow students to take courses if they are different than what we offer WCL, because one of the questions we always have, why would you go to ABC partner school if those courses that you are interested in, we are actually offering in WCL? Not to say that our courses are better, but just again to help them to strategize and to have a strong argument, because that's the question they will be asked by employers. Funny enough though, because all these employers, which I have seen a lot of our students graduating and maybe working first domestically, because there is that line, you first have to be a great domestic lawyer in order to be international law lawyer, which by taking international law classes or going for a semester abroad doesn't make you less of a domestic lawyer, just makes you someone who has a broader point of view. But it's sometimes really to translate to employers.
Great.
They obviously need more education from our side, right?
Thank you, Melanija. And Stefania, if you want to add on this, please go ahead.
Oh, yes, now all very interesting points, actually. And about what Sinisa was saying, the fact that we tend to uniformity in Europe. Yeah, and in fact, there is the issue that you have to evaluate courses taken abroad as equivalent to the one that you have in your own degree. In fact, it is a European methodology in various areas. And it depends really on the coordinators of the degree. And in fact, I was in the committees and I'm always asked, well, this student is going abroad, is taking this exam. Does it correspond or not? And I am always very, open. And if a student from Italy is going to I don't know, Poland, it happens, we have an exchange with Poland and he's taking law there, you can recognize it in Italy, but if he studies constitutional law, for instance, which doesn't happen, usually they are taking like optional courses, not the core, the main, but sometimes it happens. Then you can recognize it, of course, not at Italian constitutional law, but you can recognize it. And so, of course, I always try, and the students can play with that. So sometimes we have students who have difficulty in taking an exam in our university. They are going in another university, and then they have the exam there, and they try to have them recognized. Then there are some colleagues saying, well, this is a trick, we cannot have it, but in any case, there is the effort of going abroad, taking the exam in another language, and so you have also to consider that. Then for international law, I'm really strange that is not recognized in the core curriculum, because actually, as you know, the international treaties are binding if they're ratified. So, for instance, today I was dealing, actually, I'm helping a colleague who is a lawyer. And actually, this is something interesting, the academia with the profession, because I had the request by somebody who has children in the school, a child with handicap in the school. And then this person asked me, because I'm writing about these issues and the social rights, and to have a recourse, a challenge against the school and the system which doesn't protect really handicapped children in school. So I worked with a colleague, a lawyer, and actually there is this international treaty, the Convention of the United Nations on Disabilities, which recognizes a lot of rights. So, you know, we were working really in a legal challenge with this convention. So it is important that the students know also these. As a final point, I wanted to ask maybe Melanija, you know, after the COVID-19, many universities converted to online education. And now in Italy, some universities are thinking to maintain some courses online. Also have seen many American universities are programming these online courses. So do you think that this will change something? So for instance, can we remain in Italy and attend a law degree in the United States or not?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one way, I mean, pandemic brought us so many bad things. One of the good things is that we realized we can communicate online, right? And provide certain additional, you know, lectures and professional development courses online. I would say that what is happening right now in the United States, including our law school, they are kind of back in person, and expectation is that that's how it's going to stay. Due to ABA requirements, because they only made some exception during the official pandemic years, I don't think that will change that quickly, and that, you know, we will be able to continue online when we talk about, per se, JD program versus LLM program. I do think that there are going to be additional opportunities for some other professional development programs, that we're going to see more and more of them. When it comes to online JD program, it's going to take a while for ABA to completely accept that, and same for the LLM.
And this goes also to Sinisa's point beforehand about this kind of very Socratic education that we have here, even though, of course, we can have the Socratic method through Zoom. It's harder to have a hands-on legal education where you question the students, you make them participate to the discussion. Of course, you can do it on Zoom, but it has been more challenging. But yet what I would like to maintain, and I'm maintaining right now, because the ABA, the American Bar Association, that really, you know, law schools here in the US are, we didn't fully say, but they're graduate school, they're professional schools after your undergraduate education. So the ABA regulates a lot of guidelines and gives us lots of rules about what kind of education you need, especially because law schools are accredited by the ABA. So whatever we give has to be approved by the ABA in terms of credits, but also the bar exam. To get to the bar exam, as Melanija knows, we really have our students to take certain classes. But one thing that we can keep after the pandemic, to Stefania's point, is to teach some content of our class in an asynchronous way. So in my classes, I always try to keep an half an hour or 15 minutes of asynchronous work, which reduces my class time. And sometimes when you have 2 hours lectures, it might make the class a bit lighter, but requires them to watch a short video and answer on Canvas or another online, answer some questions that I prepare beforehand. As a result, I do a little bit of Socratic method in advance, then I have to go and read what the answers to my questions before a class, so that I can go to class and they've already done part of the education and the answers before, and I go to class with their answers, and I know exactly who has had issues in understanding the topic, who has answered what. I can start my class with their answers. So I think it adds a little bit to that interaction. And I really like that part, I have to say, even though here you always go to class with the expectation the students have read and you're ready to ask them about the case law or the theories or whatever. But this asynchronous part is really terrific because, you know, it's not only that they're reading on their own, they're reading, they have to answer, they have to put an answer in writing on online. So they have to do like a judge, you have to prepare your brief in advance and you have to do the extra legwork, which it's also lots of work for us because we need to read their answers and see what they've done.
And if I can add, I'm sorry, along the same line, I think I'm excited about the opportunity to extend more of shared classes with our counterparts across the globe now with this asynchronous method, because now we have opportunity to bring our colleagues from other law schools to our class and have our students communicating with, you know, their students. And that was something I think we have done that long time ago, but it wasn't that popular, let's put it that way. Nowadays, that's absolutely great opportunity. Or for some very tailored programs that we hosted, for example, with Chuo University in Japan, they wanted very specific program, kind of introduction to US legal institutions. It worked perfectly online. Yes, it was a little bit bumpy when it comes to Socratic method, totally agree with Fernanda, but it was great way in saving money and time as well, because they were able to participate in their own courses, and then we made sure to meet them before or after to provide this additional course. So I think the sky is the limit what we can do now with asynchronous. I just think on the American side, I don't see JD being totally online often anytime soon due to the ABA requirements and the bar requirements, which, as you know, differs from state to state as well.
And yet it's probably gonna come also for a question of costs, because one of the added value of COVID was that, for instance, we had it in Tor Vergata, we had that our international students were able to take a year completely from home. Which, yes, when you're planning to come to Rome, probably is not your first choice, but on the other side, it saves you substantial means. And at the end of the day, it really depends on the size of the class. You know, it really, at the end of the day, it really comes to whether you can see all your students on a screen or not. And if the class is small enough, but for a class on the Socratic method, it can only work if you don't have more than 30, and then you have all of them on the screen, then it could really be good. I mean, I had some of my best classes during COVID, some of my best simulations, some of my best discussions, and, even a practical point of view, because you have all the names, it's easier to remember and memorize the names of the students. But going back to what Sinisa said about the classes, I mean, also people from the audience said that they completely agree. It really takes off a lot of the value of an Erasmus if you're taking classes that you could take at home. You know, I was the first Erasmus in my home school long time ago, and only one class was recognized, which I ended up taking it again because it was a beautiful class. And the only class which corresponded was actually EU law. And the professor back at Cesare Ferri made a point that the way the French teach EU law is not, well, EEC law at the time, is not the same way the Italians teach EEC law. So I had to take the exams 3 times and finally take the whole class again until she would finally pass me. You know, as a professor, you will know that in an oral exam, if you want to fail someone, you can do it. So as a result, I did an extra year. But to my students, I always advise them to do it anyway, even if, I mean, as Fernanda says, it comes to the different BA or program, even if the classes are not recognized, the added value that you can get by taking classes that you do not have at home, it's huge. So, and whether it's law or political science, it gives you an opening of the mind, which goes well beyond the extra exam you will have to take to have all your credits.
Yes.
Just one more contextual thing. When the so-called Bologna reform was being introduced to Europe, then one of the things that professors had to do was to articulate their courses in terms of learning outcomes. And each course needed to have, I don't know, 10 or more learning outcomes. And I was at that time working as a coordinator of this reform at my university. And what I discovered is that a lot of law professors, almost everyone, had no clue what learning outcomes are, because the only learning outcome that was valid at the time was to memorize the code and to be able to recite the code to the professor on the exam. So then I try to explain, well, student will be able to analyze this or that kind of rules and to come with proposals for a solution and so on and so forth. That was completely alien to Croatian academia. And then, to my surprise, to German academia as well. I mean, my experiences are primarily Croatian, but as much as I know about other European countries, it was very, very similar. In such circumstances, I mean, you really don't need even classes. You give student a book and say memorize the book and come for the exam, and that's the tradition of legal education in many European universities. So I'm sorry.
That's true. That was my experience also memorizing civil, criminal, commercial codes in Italy. And then once I joined the practice, realizing that lawyers actually look at all the jurisprudence of the Corte di Cassazione, and they really have databases that I was never exposed to in law school about all the case law of the Italian courts. And so there was a huge gap between, at the time of our legal education, I'm assuming that now things have changed, and that the legal profession and basically the legal education are closing that gap much more. And perhaps in Europe, both European law and also clinics, there's lots of clinics about experiential education that are opening in Europe. Lots of law schools have these wonderful kind of pro bono opportunities within the law schools of professionals that are practicing law, where students can understand how is the law applied and how it works. So, but the biggest thing that strikes my mind is that while you have an American JD, American junior degree in law, that you can take in any American law school, and then you can take your bar exam, which is of course your bar exam of California, Florida, New York, as Melanija was talking about. But we are increasingly, especially in the district right now of Columbia, we're offering the UBE, the Universal Bar Exam. And Melanija, you can. So basically, it's one bar exam that should work in many jurisdictions, and I don't know what is the number of jurisdictions, Melanija, where it works.
I'm not certain of exact numbers, but idea is that you do that one and you just have a very short difference to add to it, which is way easier than it used to be, because every single jurisdiction in the United States had a totally different bar exam.
So UBE also allows you to then get into another state and practice in the other state and waive in or take a smaller exam or whatever. But in Europe, there is not such like a European bar exam that would allow. And why is that? Why? So it would be very useful to have in fact, when my students are saying to me, I want to go to Europe to practice European law, and good luck with that, unless you go to Luxembourg or you start litigating there. There's been a lot of harmonization of the legal professions, but there is not really a one law degree that is spendable or allows you to be. And maybe
I'm sorry, I just need to turn off the screen for a second, but I'm not going.
Okay, Stefania.
Yeah.
No, there is no such possibility. In fact, we may think and make a proposal about that, because I think it could be very interesting. But you know, as I'm speaking with colleagues, I was in a group of friends, and I was saying there were some engineers and lawyers, and so engineers are, for instance, are not have the same problem. They are not allowed to work as engineers in Italy if they graduated in Germany. And you know, and my friend who are engineers, they were astonished that I was saying this, and they said, well, but you know, in order to make a building, a bridge, and a motorway or whatever, in Italy you have very specific regulation that you don't learn in Germany. And why they should be allowed to work in Italy, you know, it's a competition. And I mean, they were really, you know, they didn't want the engineers from Germany or whatever. So, you know, probably it's an idea to recognize these, as you were saying, like this bar exam for Europe, for, but maybe, I don't know, for to distinguish it from the normal one, because otherwise it will not be accepted, I think. Sure. Also because in Europe we have the different languages, you know, so it's, I don't know, in which language are you taking the exam? Maybe in your mother tongue, and another language, and English, probably.
But, you know, even if there is no EU bar exam, the reality is that it's pretty interchangeable. It's actually a friend of mine who was the first one to have a lawyer's degree bar exam from Spain recognized in Italy, and all she had to do, la Sisi, she had to do the ethics exam. And this is also why lots of law students want to go to Spain, because in Spain you become a lawyer when you finish your degree, and you don't have to take the bar exam.
That changed. It was recently, but that changed. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And then they're thinking about learning on memory. It's, again, it goes back to how to access the profession, the problem that was raised before. You know, for instance, in Italy, to become a lawyer, you have to learn by heart a lot of stuff. You go with non-annotated codes. So the system, the system is geared to the access to the profession.
And I have to say that our Italian students, even if they do just their dual degree here, meaning 1 year, they're very successful in taking the bar exam, which is a memorizing exercise. It's all memory. The bar exam here, it's 3 months of preparation and memorization for 3 months. And so basically our students, European students are very successful when they take the bar exam, because their memorization approach is wonderful. So as long as they memorize all the questions in the bar exam, they'll do great. And so perhaps they don't do as great overall in law school, but they have great results in passing the bar exam.
Yeah, right. When I first introduced open book exam to my university in Zagreb, people were looking in disbelief, you know, and they were asking me, how are you going to examine students when they can have an open book, you know? They didn't understand that it's all about how you apply law, not whether you know it or not. I mean, everybody can bring 10 books into his or her legal practice and consult the sources. Nowadays with computers, everything is at hand. So the point is not in knowing everything by why am I telling this to you. So the point is how to play the game. Yeah.
This, I would say, where the American system is superior, because they force people to use their heads, you know, and they started doing it in primary, really. The research method is taught in 2nd grade, while in most European universities taught, if it's taught, in college?
I would say, American legal education teaches you how to do things with your mind, and not just how to absorb information. And that makes a big difference. Although I've heard stories when you come into practice, it's always different. So legal education does not really correspond to the reality of legal practice. But in Europe, I would say there is a huge discrepancy between legal education at university and what you need to know once you start practicing as a lawyer. And
That's true.
In Germany, it's witnessed by the system of two exams. The second state exam is basically a bar exam, but what people do, they hire professors and practitioners to teach courses to pass the second bar exam, because it's so different than legal education at university.
That's true. But in favor of European legal education, I would say both memorization is really good, and we don't memorize enough here in the US, and there should be more. The famous poem that we learned in elementary school and on, I think it should be continue more here. And the second thing is legal philosophy and legal theory, which is completely optional here in the US, just like international law, which leads to a poverty of understanding of the law here that is incredible in terms of, beyond legal realism, which many students don't even know what it is, but there's not really any kind of conceptual, philosophical, systematic approach to law in US legal education, which makes it very challenging to sometimes to have some great discussion or understanding different viewpoints. And the most kind of theoretical discussion you can have here is between pragmatism and originalism, and which I think it's really reductionist when you think about what is the nature of law, and that's why, yes, great interdisciplinarity, but not really in law school. In law school, there's fewer and fewer interdisciplinary and theoretical approaches to law, the way I see it, and I think there should be a compulsory legal theory or jurisprudence course for law students. That there isn't at this point, but we have it in Europe.
Yeah, but don't forget that the American law degree is a graduate degree, and you already get students who have some education.
Correct. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think also the difference, and when I was studying in the United States, for instance, I was missing the framework. I was, there was something that I was missing because the bigger picture was missing, and I had difficulty in grasping the problem, while the Americans are immediately going to the problem. While, for instance, in Italy, we begin by the more general issue, and then very gradually you go to the specific point. And so it's a different approach. So these methodology that are different. And the fact of learning by heart, I must say, I don't know, because I don't have a big memory. I don't know. And I think that the textbook, of course, are a summary, and sometimes they are not very, they do not comment much on why this decision, why the rule was taken as it is, but it's the task of the professor to explain that in class. So in fact, in some cases, some professors were very good at that, some others were not. And I think one problem is also that at least in Italy, we do not give a lot of emphasis to the quality of the teaching because you are evaluated only on the basis of research. So, you know, the more you publish in the right journals, then you go ahead with your career. But the quality of teaching, you know, is left to the individuals. However, there are some schools, some universities that are different. For instance, Maastricht University in the Netherlands, they use a different methodology, which is more based on issues, on projects, and but more on issues. So, and then the students, they have to make research and by themselves and then discuss. But of course, this type of methodology requires a lot of time. So if you just explain the book, you save the time and the students will know more. So if you really have, you need to have a certain program. And that's a method, because I also use some Socratic method, but it takes so much time that at the end you risk that you don't have the time to teach all the subjects to the students. So that's the thing. So you have to choose. So if you have to teach all the textbook of constitutional law, so it's a choice. If you use this other methodology in the United States, I think you risk missing some part of the program that you'd have in Europe. But but you know, it's different.
Yeah, it's a methodological choice that you can do. To sum up, we need to close. I would just say, if you all want to conclude with 1 minute to say anything you like, or conclude about the relevance and the challenges of this legal education abroad, please do so. We'll start from Melanija, and then Sinisa and Stefania.
I'm going to remain supporter of exchange programs and educating our students on a global level. Definitely have so many challenges, but you know, challenges are driving points in our lives, right? So we are going to keep working hard. I think we have to educate our employers. We'll have to communicate and educate those who are making rules. In the United States, it will be American Bar Association. Certain things will never change. Just to go back just for a second, as a summary, what all three of you actually said, I don't think we are going to make that perfect marriage that I dream of between European way of teaching and American. But, you know, European style of teaching produces great lawyers in one way, American great lawyers in another way. I'm missing that theoretical, philosophical, historical point of view here as well. But back home, we were all complaining because we had to do that. When we listen to the great cases of WTO, for example, you can close your eyes and regardless of the accent, you can know which one is American, which one is European lawyer, because Americans are quick to make a strong argument, but it's not always on a good legs because they don't understand the broader frame, which Stefania said as well. But I think we have a lot to do, and that's great because we can keep being passionate about global education and try to change as we can, to change things we can, and those we cannot, we'll just do our best educating our students in the best possible way to be the changers of the world.
Great, thank you, Melanija. Sinisa, please go ahead.
Right. Well, mobility. I would think that mobility is still reserved for a very small fraction of law students, very small number of students who actually go to study abroad. And in a sense, you know, to exercise mobility is a luxury for a law student. It's something which comes extra on the top, and it's neither cheap nor rational for a law student who wants to graduate as soon as possible and then get employment to go study abroad. But for those who have this urge, for those who have this ambition to see whether the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, it's an experience which cannot be replaced later in life. It has to happen at the stage of university studies, and it opens so many opportunities, regardless of whether it's useful in the short term or not. So I would encourage everyone to go and try at least for a semester.
Thank you so much, Sinisa. And I have to go, but now please, Stefania, let us know, and then Dr. Bindi will conclude the event. Thank you very much.
Bye, Fernanda.
Bye.
No, I'm also, I mean, I think I was lucky that I managed to go to the United States, and I would recommend to everybody to make an exchange, to go abroad, also to understand the limits of yourself. It's very important also because the logic of the law is the same wherever you go. So you are missing the details, but it doesn't matter because, you know, law changes. So if you know how to find things, then you are correct. So you are in the right place and you have the mentality to find a solution. I think that it would be important also in the public administration. In Italy, we have public administration composed mostly of lawyers, and it's very difficult to solve issues, to solve problems. They just stick to this. No, you cannot do this. Yes, these. While if you are more flexible, then you are more capable of solving issues, and you are less on the defensive. So I think in the long run, it would be, I would put it, I wouldn't put it compulsory to go abroad, but you know, almost.
And maybe we should all add, because I think we're on the same page, being that it's impossible for every student to go abroad, we are actually lucky to have this new, I mean, technology always going ahead and opportunity to communicate online. It is again great opportunity to expose students who otherwise cannot go abroad.
Yep. I think we all agree that international education is super important in legal professions as well. Thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate this. Was a super interesting discussion. It's gonna be posted on the project website and distributed in a few hours. With this, our project on international higher education ends, but with Stefania and Fernanda, we have another project that we are closing on women and leadership. So there will be a workshop on women in courts at the EU 10 and 11th of October, and one on women in business, actually, with Stefania also this fall. I thank you, Melanija, as well. Thank you, Sinisa. I thank you, Stefania.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you all soon in person as well. Have a nice day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.